All right, hello there, HPE 205. Here we go, moving along on chapter 12, going to be looking at individuals with visual impairments and blindness. So we're going to be talking about this lower left picture, about the white cane that is used to assist individuals who are blind, visually impaired, a little bit about vision loss and levels of it. And then for sure in this bottom right, we're going to be looking at some teaching strategies also. So just to review the definition of visual impairment, according to IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it states that visual impairment, including blindness, is a deficiency in vision that even when corrected, adversely affects a child's education performance. And the term visual impairment includes both partial sight and blindness, which you're going to learn in the next chapter is a bit different compared to deafness and hard of hearing or hearing impairment. So just to recap, so we're kind of all on the same level of knowledge when it comes to vision acuity. Hopefully many of you have gone to get your eyes checked and you probably have used this kind of assessment tool, which is the Snellen Eye Chart. And this is to look at vision acuity. And so we see the green line here on this picture, and that's really where you want to be, is at that level or below. So that's going to be 20/25, 20/20, and normal vision for visual acuity for humans is 20/20. So that would be able to read line 8 from 20 feet away. So if you're able to read line 8 from 20 feet away with both your left and your right eye, you would be considered as having 20/20 visual acuity. And therefore, typically, you're not wearing any glasses unless you have some other issues going on with your vision. So if people have vision loss, say 2100, which is going to be this line 2, the letters F and P, what is these numbers 2100, 2020, 2010? What does that mean? Well, what that means is a person that has vision loss of 2100, what a typical eye can see at 100 feet away is what this individual can see at 20 feet away, okay, based upon the clarity of their vision to be able to read the letters on this. Okay, so there are individuals that have better vision than 20/20, right? They may have 20/15, and so that's a higher acuity than typical. And so what that means is that what most individuals with normal eye function and acuity can see at 15 feet, the individual actually can see at 20 feet. So they actually have a higher level of acuity. But for the most part, typically we have 20/20, and then as we age, typically that acuity decreases. So just so you have an idea of what 20/20 actually means. And if you are an individual that does wear glasses or contacts, next time that you go to an appointment, try to figure out what your visual acuity is and get that asked. So the first time I ever got glasses, I was sitting on 20/25. And so I only had to use them because I was nearsighted, is if I really need to see something far out in the distance. Okay, so what are some classification of visual impairment, or acronym alert, VI, visual impairments? So visual impairment is really this umbrella term encompassing both all the way from total blindness to partial sight. So VI, or visual impairment, is again just a very broad term. Many people that state that they have partial sight, they typically can read print through the use of large print or magnification. If an individual is blind, typically they're unable to read large print, even with magnification. Now, legal blindness is acuity of 2200 or less in the better eye with the best possible correction, or field loss of 20 degrees or less in diameter in the better eye. And we'll talk about the difference between acuity and field loss coming up. Travel vision, usually that's individuals that are able to see a minimum of 5 to 10 feet within normal eye, can see 200 feet. So they're able to really only see 5 to 10 feet around them. Motion perception is ability to see movement within 3 to 5. Typical eye can see it up to 200 feet away. Light perception is individuals that only can see really strong light, such as the sun or, super bright light, and they're not able to really detect any hand motions or any facial features or anything like that. And then total blindness is really the inability to really recognize any of that strong light shining directly into the eyes. But again, majority of individuals don't have total blackness, when even individuals that are classified as blind. All right, so before we get into a little bit more about vision loss and levels of it, I do just want to make sure that we all have this important knowledge related to white canes. The technical term is white cane. It isn't a stick, isn't a white stick, isn't a hiking pole. It is called a white cane, and this is a device that is used to assist orientation and mobility of individuals who are blind and visually impaired. And the cane itself has 3 parts to it. It has the grip, which is the top black part, which individuals use to hold on to the cane. The cane itself, which is the white area into the red area, and then the tip, which is on the end, and the tip can be really different based upon the preference of the individual, based upon where they're traveling, what they're traveling on, and many canes you can change the tips because they do also get worn away. Majority of these type of canes, there are a couple different types of canes, but these are the most primarily used canes. They are collapsible, so they do fold. There's kind of an elastic band in the middle, and they can fold usually in fourths and claps. And really, when it comes to physical activity and physical education, people with blindness and visual impairment should fold their white cane and put it away in a safe place. So really, the white cane is only to be used while walking and not really when participating in physical activities. And just real quick, this lower right picture, many of you may be just walking around and you don't realize that you're actually walking on tactile tiles, which are used actually for individuals who are blind, visually impaired to give them notification of danger. So those white, those elevated tiles that have circles on it is really an indication for people that are blind, visually impaired that danger is coming up past them. All right, so let's get a little bit more into visual impairments and blindness. So again, we talked about acuity. That's a chart that measures acuity in individuals. And acuity is really the clarity of your vision, right? So we know if we kind of squint, we can increase our clarity. I know I squint a lot because I should be wearing my glasses way more than I am if I really am wearing my glasses that much. So, there are times that if I can't read, I will squint, and that really just increases my clarity of my vision. So when we look at acuity, we're looking at that clarity. So it's the sharpness of really the retinal focus of the eye itself, and it's dependent on the health and healthy functioning of our retina within the eye. And it's really sensitive to how our brain facilitates vision, and that's how the eye actually reacts to increase sharpness when we are viewing. So you might think about like perception, and when you focus in on something and your depth perception goes a little bit blurry, right? You can think about the portrait mode in iPhones now, right? So it focuses on the subject, and then the background kind of gets a little bit blurry. Our eye actually does that pretty innately within the brain. If we're focused on something, the background gets a little bit blurry. If we focus on the background, the subject in front of us gets blurry. And you could just practice that, give it a test, look at your computer, kind of gaze at the background. It's going to be blurry. Look at your background, the computer is going to be blurry. So it's pretty amazing how much the brain works with our vision and how our eyes react to be able to increase clarity and acuity. The other area is our visual field. And within visual impairments and blindness, we talk about field loss. And so visual field is areas of vision that we have. So if you were to kind of stand up or just put your hand straight out in front of you and you just looked straight ahead, you didn't turn left or right, you didn't allow your eyes to track left or right, and you just spread your arms apart, keep going until you cannot see your fingers anymore. All right? Majority of us are going to be at that full 180 degree of our vision, right? And actually, if you flip your hands and you go up and down, right, we actually see less in our visual field on the upper and lower quadrants, and that's relative to how our eyes are actually shaped. And if you are into animals, you can look at the shape of animals' eyes, and that will give you a little bit of information about visual field. So back to individuals with visual impairments and blindness, right? Individuals may have areas of field loss in addition or simultaneous to acuity issues as well. So in this picture below, this individual has central field loss. So there is kind of this tunneling of darkness occurring in the center of their vision. And there may be peripheral or side vision field loss, okay? Or there may just be blind spots, so detected areas of vision loss within the typical area of vision as well. So when we look at degrees, we look at individuals that may have tunneling, which means coming from the peripheral sides all the way down to where they only have a small degree of vision to be able to see. So that's the tunneling of their vision. All right, so within sport, when we look at visual classifications, we just talked a little bit about this with our adaptive sport Paralympics, if you can think back about classification regarding adapted sport. Our International Blind Sports Association has 3 different classifications, class B1, B2, and B3. So B1 is the largest deficit of vision and sight. So that's from no light perception in either eye to light perception and the inability to recognize shape of a hand or at any distance or in any direction. So those individuals for sure would be identified as blind. B2 is the ability to recognize shape of a hand up to a visual acuity of 2600 or a vision field less than 5 degrees in the best eye with the best practical eye correction. So you're like looking through a straw, okay? B3 is the highest amount of vision who could still qualify to participate in blind sports, and that's a visual acuity above 2600 up to 2200. So that's the range of visual acuity, and a vision field loss less than 20 degrees, but more than 5 degrees in the best eye with best practical eye correction. Now, the US ABA, the United States Association of Blind Athletes, has a B4 classification, which does not qualify to compete in blind sports outside of the US, but can compete within the US. And that B4 classification is visual acuity 2200 to 2070 and a visual field larger than 20 degrees in the best eye with the best practical eye correction. So that's how sport classification is done regarding individuals with visual impairments and blindness. So what are some different types of vision loss? And I'm not going to go into detail about these. Really, anytime you have a student that has vision loss or blindness, it's best to find out what caused their vision loss, but more so what is their actual functional vision, and what adaptations, modifications are going to be needed as well. So these are kind of the highest incidence ones regarding congenital, meaning they were born with this this kind of disability that has caused vision loss. So individuals with albinism, individuals with retinitis of prematurity, ROP, retinoblastoma, and then adventitious or acquired types of vision loss. So this happens after they're born. At some point they acquire vision loss, and that could be done by macular degeneration, retinitis pigmentosa, RP, cortical visual impairment, glaucoma, cataracts. It could be caused by damage to the eye, right? So many different things can also cause vision loss that's acquired as well. So how does blindness affect individuals beyond just their sight? So especially individuals regarding students we're going to see in the K-12 system do have impact to their affective and social areas. So some individuals who are blind, visually impaired may have some self-regulation behaviors. It used to be called blindisms, where they may kind of rock back and forth. They may do some eye poking. They may kind of sway back and forth. They may kind of keep their head down. And that's really because of the lack of the body getting sensory input through their visual field. And so because they're not always gaining this information coming through visually, the body is kind of needing to do other things to self-regulate. And so even though it may look a bit atypical to us, majority of the time it's just a way to self-regulate themselves. Also, many individuals that are blind or have a visual impairment may be overprotected from their family and may be limited in what they're able to experience because of the fact that they may get hurt or they may cause more damage to their vision. And so there's an element of overprotection that limits them from physical activity, socializing, and gaining independence. Also, many children with vision loss and blindness may also feel isolation because of the inability to socially interact. If you don't know if there's people around you or who is around you, that's really important to have social interactions as well. They also have limited access to physical activities due to the lack of sight, making it difficult for them to participate in fitness, sport, and physical education unless adaptations and modifications are provided for them to increase access to those activities and movements. There's decreased opportunities for socialization. They have difficulties understanding social cues because of their lack of visual input. And so a lot of social skills need to be taught to them, and takes a lot longer for them to process and be able to understand because they're not able to see all of the gestures and non-verbal communication occurring. And they also have increased dependent levels, and that kind of comes with overprotection where, the people around them, the network is really giving them too much assistance and help that they will develop dependency as well. And then I want you to just think about what are some potential other areas of affective or social elements that individuals who are blind or visually impaired may experience. All right, now we're going to get into motor, physical, and fitness areas. And I want you to kind of complete the rest of this on your notes. And so I'm going to be telling you about the characteristics that occur between blind people or people that are blind or visually impaired. I'm going to try to use my identity first language here to respect those that prefer blindness as identity first. And then you're going to fill out what's the impact of that element and what are some possible solutions. So research has shown that individuals who are blind, visually impaired do have motor delays that comes about with gross motor milestones are typically delayed in achieving, but also those fundamental motor skills are delayed as well or impacted. So what impact does that have, or implication does that have for future? And then what are some solutions to deal with motor delays? Also, because of the lack of visual input, many individuals that are blind visually impaired may have postural deviations, especially if they're not gaining any information coming in through visually. They may keep their head down, their shoulders may be rotated forward. So what's the impact of that, and what are some possible solutions? They may have distorted or lack body image. They have balance delays or balance difficulties. They may have a shuffling, walking gait or decrease in their gait length. And they also have decreased health-related fitness components. So complete the rest of this chart. You can pause the video, figure out what's the impact or implication future that may provide additional issues if not dealt with, and then what are some solutions to try to increase the delay or impact. Okay, now we're going to shift gears a bit and talk about inclusion strategies. Clearly, one of the easiest one is equipment modifications. So on the bottom of the screen here, I have a foam ball that has bells in it, which is great for them to be able to auditorily track a ball if they're not able to see it. This other ball has a mechanism with batteries inside that beeps continuously. Therefore, if the ball stops, it still beeps where the bells are going to stop ringing if the ball stops. Also, contrast colors. So, if you are on a gym floor that's made out of wood, it's kind of like a yellowish color, you might want to have balls that are purple or blue. So if they do have some vision, then they see the object better if it's contrast compared to like this orange ball on top of a yellow wood floor. Also, to increase inclusion of students that are blind visually impaired into general physical education or into physical activities, team teaching is really beneficial. So if you have the opportunity to train peer tutors to work with students who are blind visually impaired, that has been proven through research to be beneficial. Only when the peer tutors have been provided training. If you just partner them up, there's really no success that occurs with a peer tutor. Using paraeducators that may be within the class or may be able to provide some additional input when you as the instructor are working with other students. Definitely consulting with your adapted physical education specialists or the teacher of the blind visually impaired or the orientation and mobility specialist. All of those should be really part of your team when you're looking to include students with blindness into physical education. Also, preloading content. So being able to give a kind of heads up about a future activity or a future unit prior to it actually occurring. So if you're going to switch units and you're going to get into a total new topic of physical activities, letting them know that, letting them experience the equipment, feel the equipment, have understanding of what skills are going to be required prior to that first class of them coming in with the rest of their class. So you preload them with content before they come in and experience content for the first time with their peers. Also making sure the curriculum works on both open and closed sport activities. So remember through your motor development 186 class, closed sport activities or movements, which are two of these examples here. This is myself working with an individual who's blind with archery and then rock climbing. So closed is you kind of set the pace, you determine your level. Open activities are extrinsically paced. Extrinsically, there's defense, there's things, and that's going to be a lot more difficult for a majority of students who are blind visually impaired. You may have to make modifications to rules, equipment modifications. You might need to put sound devices on goals or on the back of the basketball net to be able to give them auditory cues. Allowing individuals and students themselves who are blind, visually impaired to advocate, to have a voice in your class is really important. Provide them leadership roles. Give them an opportunity to share their perspective or what is needed for them to be successful. And also including blind sports within your general physical education curriculum. So how can we continue to foster independence, right? So the more we can provide opportunities where students who are blind, visually impaired can be successful independently is really powerful and really important. So making sure as a service provider that you really maintain a positive attitude about the student and you challenge your own self kind of biases on, are you lowering expectations just because of their vision loss or for other reasons? So challenging yourself to make sure that you're at least providing choice for that student to do the activities independently and at the same level as their peers. So encouraging participation in all activities is very, very important. Just like all the disabilities we've talked about, individuals that are blind, visually impaired, it's a spectrum, right? Each student is going to have a different level of vision loss, a different level of life experiences and opportunities of movement and sport and confidence. And so always providing that opportunity and then looking at modifications that may be needed and fading those adaptations once they gain independence and gain strategies. Working with the parents to show what their child is capable of and what their abilities are is important because that decreases the overprotection of parents if they're able to see what they are able to achieve. Making sure that you're challenging the student, that you're keeping that high level of expectation, and that you expect the student to do it independently. And that if they can't do it, that they need to advocate for assistance or for help. So you give them a voice instead of automatically just stating that we're going to make this adaptation for you. And then also making sure that we're doing task analysis. So making sure that when we look at high expectations, that is also a high expectation that they perform the movements properly. And that we don't just skip over because we're like, oh, they're blind, visually impaired. It's going to take too long to actually teach them how to do it correctly. That's not going to lead them into independence regarding physical activities. So what are some teaching techniques that are beneficial when we are instructing students that are blind, visually impaired? For sure, verbal explanation. So using more auditory cues, using more concrete instruction, using polyspots that are raised for them to be able to feel where their feet need to be, providing them with kind of left or right or 90 degrees, or using a clock for directions, 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock, compared to like over there, left, right? So being very concrete in your verbal explanations is really beneficial, just like we do in our verbal cues, right? So like ball at hip, to be able to start overhand throw, ball in your hand, but then saying ball at hip gives you approximation of where you want that arm and hand to be with the ball for the starting position. So just being concrete in your instruction, making sure that you provide demonstration and modeling of how you want the skill to be performed, and if possible, doing so within their acuity distance and field of vision, right? So they may need to be closer to you as an instructor when teaching to be able to better see you, and know that because of field loss, they might be looking to the left, but if they have field loss in one area, they might actually be looking at you in the best part of their vision, even though it might look like they're not looking at you directly. So just be aware of that. Providing physical guidance or physical assistance. We'll talk a little bit about hand underhand compared to hand overhand. So giving them the option of being able to let go, and instead of doing hand over hand where you are in power and control, going hand under hand with the student gets to feel what they want to feel, and they also get to kind of let go when they don't want to participate in that type of guidance anymore. So tactile modeling is just that, where you kind of set your body up in the proper position, and then the student tactily can feel where your body is in relation to space, or relation to an object or a piece of equipment, and then how it moves. Also using sound devices to help kind of differentiate areas on the field or targets. Using visual cues, if they do have some functional vision, to make sure that we're using that functional vision to also increase their understanding and learning. We've talked a lot about whole part whole instruction, which is really important, so they understand how each of these parts are going to be implemented into the whole movement. And also providing direction in large print or Braille, so that if they missed some of the visual demonstration and they heard it but kind of forgot about it, they can go back to a resource and read large print, the instructions for the activity or the station or the skill, or be able to look at it from Braille. There's a bunch of others on the videos that are provided to you. So if you go under D2L for this module, you'll be able to see a lot more resources related to videos and teaching techniques. And just so some explanation of these pictures here, I'm working with young children who are blind, visually impaired. The one I'm teaching them how to do a proper forehand strike with a tennis racket. So I'm providing some feedback, not just auditorily, but kinesthetically. And then the young girl on the bottom, we are working on sliding, and we are doing it what's called coactively. So we are both standing on the same carpet squares, and we're moving our feet together so that she's able to feel my body moving, see kind of my body moving, and then try to replicate it with her body as well. So for individuals that are blind, visually impaired, some of them may utilize Braille to be able to access print. And so Braille is raised dots that are based out of 6 dots. And so those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the combination of those being raised will determine what the letters are. And individuals that are blind, visually impaired use Braille to access information. They can use it in this watch to be able to be independent, to know what time it is. Even some of these watches will actually provide them text messages that come in through their phone. So if they don't want to use their text-to-speech, their auditory, they can actually read the text coming through on their watch in Braille, so they know what may be happening on their cell phone. And clearly for them to access information as far as textbooks or any written form, that's going to be produced in Braille as well. So we're going to watch this quick video on different types of Braille that are available.
Types of Braille. There are a number of different versions of Braille. This video will touch on 3. The first being uncontracted Braille, signed, not contracted Braille. In uncontracted Braille, each cell represents one character. For example, the word button would use 6 cells, 1 letter per cell. Now, contracted Braille, signed, contracted Braille. Contracted Braille introduces contractions for the purpose of saving space. To continue with the example of button, it would be represented as BN, using only 2 cells rather than 6. You can see how contracted Braille is more efficient for the user, saving both time and space. The third type we'll talk about is computer Braille code. Computer Braille code, signed CBC, introduces dots 7 and 8, making it a modified 8-dot cell. Dots 7 and 8 allow for tactual representation of computer-related symbols, for example, underline and hyperlink. These are just two examples. There are many more.
Okay, now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the Expanded Core Curriculum, or ECC. And what I would like you to do is go ahead and pause this video, and I want you to just go ahead and do a quick Google search or whatever search engine you prefer, and look at students with vision loss and expanded core curriculum. There are 9 components within the ECC, so I want you to be able to understand why there is this expanded core curriculum. What are the 9 components? So be able to name them and describe them. And then think about how you could implement each one of the 9 components within physical education or adapted physical education or movement. All right, we're going to watch this quick video to learn about Human Guide.
Please. Human Guide techniques.
A human guide is a person who provides travel assistance to someone who is blind or deafblind by helping them move safely from one place to another. The individual who is blind will choose the tools they use to travel, including a white cane, support cane, dog guide, human guide, or a combination of these.
Initiating Human Guide.
Guiding may start with the guide asking if the traveler would like to use human guide technique. The guide may ask which side the traveler prefers to be on. Oftentimes, it is the opposite side that they hold their cane. This traveler prefers to use his cane along with human guide.
Grasp and positioning.
While other travelers may want to use human guide alone. Again, it is always up to the traveler. The standard technique for human guide is the traveler placing a firm grasp above the elbow of the guide. The guide keeps their arm relaxed and extended downward so that the traveler can feel subtle changes in their movement and direction. The standard technique can be modified to fit people with significant height differences, personal preferences, and physical challenges.
Pace.
It is important to respect the pace of the traveler and slow or quicken the pace accordingly. When walking, the guide should remain 1/2 step ahead of the traveler. However, when using stairs, the guide should be 1 full step ahead.
Narrow passageway doors.
When you are approaching a narrow passageway, the guide places their arm behind their back, signaling to the traveler that they are approaching a narrow space. The traveler will slide their hand down to the guide's wrist and will follow behind the guide.
Doors.
A basic rule to remember when guiding a traveler through a door is whoever is on the hinge side of the door takes control of the door. In this example, the hinge is on the guide's side, so she is opening and holding the door for the traveler. When the hinge is on the traveler's side, the guide may use hand-under-hand technique to guide the traveler's hand to the door.
Communicating environmental changes.
The guide can adjust their pace or pause briefly to indicate an upcoming change in the environment, including ramps, stairs, curbs, or other changes in the surface. When approaching stairs, the guide should pause, and proceeds slowly, allowing the traveler to feel the upward or downward movement. In familiar settings, the traveler may reach out independently to grasp the railing.
Hand under hand technique.
In unfamiliar settings, the guide may use hand under hand technique to guide the traveler's hand to the railing.
For more information regarding human guide technique, please contact a local orientation and mobility specialist.
Okay, we're going to continue on and talk about guide running techniques. So, like we said in the beginning, for individuals when they're participating in physical activities, they should not be using their white cane. And you can continue to utilize human guide, but the primary type of guide when running or doing physical activity is tether use. And a tether is really just connecting the person who's blind, visually impaired to their guide. And there's lots of different preferences on tether use, and there's also different regulations and rules for types of tethers within different competitions. So in this picture in the middle, we can see a runner who is blind, and then they have a small short rope between their guide who is running next to them. It looks like probably running on a 100-meter sprint. And so the guide gets one lane on the track, and then the runner who's blind, visually impaired gets another lane of the track, and they run together pretty much in close unison for this sprint. And this tether is a small piece of rope that is used between the two of them for the guide to be able to make sure that that runner is staying straight and is going to take the shortest route from the start blocks to the finish line. In this picture in the upper right, this is actually from a triathlon. And so this individual is just using a tether between her hips because they're going to be running for a very, very long time. And it's a long triathlon, so it's a long running portion. And so they shouldn't really run into many other participants. And so they don't need a really short tether. They have a longer tether between the hips. And then the guide definitely is going to be providing auditory cues and prompting throughout if anything were need to happen. And if, say, they were going to pass another set of runners, the athlete could always just hold on to the guide's arm, as in human guide, for that short duration to get through whatever might be a safety issue in the race, and then go back to just using their hip tether as well. So for the most part, majority of athletes who are blind, visually impaired, or blind athletes use a tether for doing physical activities. You can utilize a guide wire, which typically is done for just that 100-meter or 100-yard sprint. And that is a staked down wire that is super, super tight. And then a individual who's blind, visually impaired will have an actual rope or line off of it. And so as they run, that guide wire is helping them kind of stay straight. You could utilize a sound source to give a runner a location auditory on where they need to run. Or some individuals that only have vision impairment, you could have a guide and just wear a super bright shirt that is of a color that they can see best, and they can just use that guide to help them. You may have seen it in the Paralympics with skiing, that many of the guides will have a bright orange kind of jersey on as the guide, and they ski in front of the visually impaired skier. And so they're able to kind of see that color better against the white snow. Or there's independent running or using a treadmill. And if the individual uses Braille, we can actually put Braille stickers on the treadmill so that they're able to operate the buttons independently. So what are some sport opportunities, or really just more physical activity opportunities for individuals that are blind, visually impaired? There are inclusive sports that they could participate in, intramurals, interscholastic, community-based, recreation sport opportunities that they can participate in. There's the United States Association of Blind Athletes, or USABA, if they wanted to get into a higher level of sport competition or just participate in some of their like training camps or learning about different sports. The International Blind Sports Federation. There's a National Beat Baseball Association for athletes that are blind, visually impaired that want to play beat baseball. And also summer sports camps like Camp Abilities that we have here at Westchester during Memorial Day weekend, which is a sports camp specifically designed for children with visual impairments. And here is a few pictures of me working tandem biking, which is one of my favorite sports, with Camp Abilities because it provides such independence and freedom for athletes that are blind, visually impaired. So what I would like you to do is go ahead and scan this QR code with your cell phone. It's going to take you to a website which is going to provide a bunch of additional videos on sport instruction. And I would like you to choose one of those videos and watch it. And then on D2L, I have a discussion prompt for you to be able to reflect on what you learned or gained from the sport instructional video that you selected, and also why did you select that specific one. And that's going to mark you as here on our virtual asynchronous day. And if for some reason you're not able to access the QR code, the website is also provided here on the slide as well. And majority of these videos are provided on D2L for you to be able to access. All right, let's go ahead and review our chapter. So by the end of this lecture and utilizing the resources that are available on D2L, you should be able to define blind visual impairment, defined by IDEA, understand how vision loss is classified and determined as far as acuity and field loss, the impact on vision loss regarding affective, social, and physical motor. What are some adaptations and teaching strategies specific to students with blindness and visual impairment? Recall elements of the expanded core curriculum and how it relates and how it can be implemented within physical education, activity, and health. And then understand basic human guide and tether use. All right, great, thanks.